Hello, everyone. My name is Nilotpal Gohai, and I am the author of the book, The Legend of Lachit Barphukan. Welcome, everyone, to the Pune International Literature Festival, one of the premier literature festival of India. The Legend of Lachit Barphukan, the book chronicles the life of Lachit Barphukan from childhood to the Battle of Saraighat, where he defeated the mighty Mughals with a mere small cantonment of 20,000 soldiers, and he led his army against the mighty Mughals of around 50,000 soldiers. The book is published by Loxley Hall Publishing, one of the finest publishing houses, and is represented by a premier literary agent called the Book Bakers. The book has been acquired for visual adaptation by the Almighty Motion Picture, who has to their credit movies like Gangs of Wasseypur, Tanuvets Manu, etc. Thank you once again, and I welcome you all to the Pune International Literature Festival. Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Studio 2. We now begin our conversation, The Return of the Brahmin. Devapriya Roy will be in conversation with Ravi Shankar Etteth. Ravi Shankar Etteth is an Indian author and cartoonist. He worked for the Indian Express as the staff cartoonist. In 1990, he became the creative director of the Observer Group of Publications. He has worked as the editor-in-chief and CEO of Voice of India. In 1996, Etteth published his first book of short stories, The Scream of the Dragonflies. He is the author of 4 novels, The Tiger by the River, The Village of the Widows, The Gold of Their Regrets, and The Book of Shiva. Devapriya Roy is the author of 3 best-selling novels, The Vague Woman's Handbook, The Weight Loss Club, and Friends from College. In 2015, she published The Heat and Dust Project, co-written with Saurabh Jha, and the book debuted at #1 on the Hindustan Times AC Nielsen list. In 2018, she published Indra in collaboration with artist Priya Kurian. I request Devapriya Roy to start the conversation.
Hi, Ravi.
Hey, what do you think? I think.
As we begin chatting, I want to tell our audience a very irrelevant fact, which has nothing to do with our books and our writing, but I find it terribly amusing. We share the same birthday, the two of us. Isn't that curious?
I want the present. I want the present. She gets the cake.
Okay, that's not the direction in which I wanted to take this.
Sorry.
Instead, you'll get a difficult question. Okay, Ravi. First question, then we'll mix it up. We're talking officially about this book.
Okay.
As you can see, mine has all these flags and post-its. But we'll also talk about the writing life. We'll talk a little bit about the pandemic, what that has meant for the writing life, and we'll talk a little bit about the book scene in India, right? But before to talk about the book first, though, Ravi, why Ashoka and why now?
All right. See, Devapriya, I mean, as any, history is big right now, okay? History is big, and I don't mean it fictional. I mean, there is this huge conflict over history between the right and the left. And so far, our history has been shaped by, a lot of external influences, which is, the white man's burden, how the white man saw India. In fact, you can't blame the Mughals or anybody because they were basically travelers. They were really not history. I mean, whether it be the Chinese travelers who Buddhist Viharas or, And then came the westernized elite, which had access to uh, the English idiom of history, right?
The
Now,
sort of historical method, right?
yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I wouldn't say history belongs to victors. I think history belongs to whoever is relevant, at a particular point in time.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
until recently, the history, the citadel of history has been the guardians, have been the left wing,
Hmm.
anxious intellectuals.
Hmm.
Now, now the thing is, unfortunately, the right wing, which
Hmm.
is coming
Hmm.
to power right now, I
Hmm.
mean, they don't have the scholars of history. I mean, either they have been, they haven't got enough access to material, or they have too, the ballast of mythology and the ballast of the Hindu understanding of history.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that
Or
is
there are too few, or they have too few
yes, because
historians
there is a
to
reason, no?
address. Hmm.
Because of the reason. I mean, if you look at the majority of the Hindu thinkers, or we call the Hindu thinkers today, they're very deeply rooted in Hindi. Which is, I mean, which can actually, you can say that it's a national language and all that, which I don't think so anyway. But the fact is that they do not. I mean, just the fact that you have a Hindi background in education and in kinds of exposure immediately can exclude you from the larger mainstream aspect of history. So, the very aspect that history itself, the reading of history, the recording of history, the presentation of history today has moved a lot from pure academia to go to more accessible history. And people who haven't had a discipline as historians are now kind of becoming historians. And I think I'm all for it. Like, for example, like what William Dalrymple started with Iram Koti and I forget this, Manu Pillai is doing right now.
Hmm.
I mean,
Right.
they're not historians. I mean, somebody is a journalist, somebody is a speechwriter for a politician. So they are interested in history, right? Then they're like history aficionados or something. I don't know the pronounce the word right. So that is something that eludes the right wing because they're so pretty serious about everything because they have a huge chip on the shoulder as far as respect is concerned, and they think they're not being
Yeah.
respected. And to a
Right.
certain extent, that's true because it's a Western
Hmm.
intellectual, anti-science
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing which has got control over academia.
Hmm.
And now again, to change academia, you're putting people who are not really intellectually, let's say, empowered enough to kind of run a thing like JNU. So they're more interested in kind of, doing foolish things. Let's put it
Yeah,
mildly.
exactly. And I think the other gap over here is that academia, or how history is within the academia and reaching the masses, there's also that huge sort of gap over there, right? That so a lot of in the absence of, let's say, many more historians of the right, what has happened is a lot of people only look at these WhatsApp forwards as history,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. No, I agree with you.
So
You know,
yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
actually, let's look at it. I mean, in the sense that this selling of history, the right wing selling of history is basically, Ravan Airways and, Narendra Modi missile, and, stuff like that. I mean, it may, like, like India TV, actually, remember that cow being, I mean, I'll never forget that, like the clip of this UFO kind of, hanging around somewhere, that, that wave, kind of cow, just going up like that, all right? So that works very well with the large Hindi belt cowbell audience, which is not really exposed to anything. They're not exposed to global thought. They're not exposed to the English mainstream and writing, whether it be in fiction or non-fiction. So they are kind of grew up hearing stories about how Raman came and came in an aircraft or something like that. So the pitch which the right wing historians are doing, they're addressing that particular demographic. While the rest of India, like for example, South India is highly literate. I mean, it is a comparatively much prosperous land. And where there is prosperity and education, there is exposure, right? I mean, look at the number of Telugus who have kind of moved as IT guys. Look at the number of people who have come from the north into Bangalore as the IT capital. So the whole exposure of the South Indian ethos is very different from what is happening in the cowbell ethos. Unfortunately, people sitting in the north, I mean, they think that the north is the only thing matters. I mean, when I go to Kerala, which is my hometown, I mean, nobody's heard of like Lucknow, Yogi. It's all far away. It's irrelevant.
Hmm.
So this history they're packaging instead of rejecting the West. You know, take the best out of it. That's what the British
Yeah.
did. That's what we did with the Brits.
And
So
it has to be within sort of it has to be a writing back which takes
absolutely,
into account, it has to. And yeah, it's sort of one of the realities of our post-colonial existence, right? That because
yeah,
the metropolitan center of
yeah,
academia is still very much the West, that we find ourselves spending a lot of time doing that. But it's also true that that what you've managed to do in these two novels, in Return of the Brahmin and the
so you
pre
asked me why
and the
Ashoka. Go on.
original book, right? What you've managed to do so brilliantly is bring alive the time with all its historical details. It's actually, I learned more about that time from your book than I had done in 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 all the years in which, this
Thank
the
you.
Mauryan history was taught to me, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's so how do, but my question was also, why Ashoka? As in, is it also because the world seems to be in love with the idea of strongmen now, you know
Yeah, I
and
mean that's an extremely good. That's a very very good observation. See, number one, I want to take a guy because I'm a kind of I like the iconoclastic way of thinking. All right. Now, if somebody's kind of pitching me, I mean, like history or my teacher, somebody's pitching me this child, this kind of great guy. I don't believe it because I believe people have flaws. I mean, especially the greater the guy, the more deeper he's flawed. I mean, if you look at anywhere in history, I mean, the greater the person, the more deeply the flawed person is. I mean, whether it be Einstein, whether it be Churchill, whether it be Gandhi, I mean, they're all deeply flawed human beings. So I said, look, how is this guy who's kind of, had running this vast empire, which actually started off pretty small? What
mm,
the heck did he become this man of peace, this agent of peace? Then
mm,
I started reading up. Then I realized that there was no mention of Ashoka very seriously in Indian history before the British started kind of controlling India. And what I read was that there was this British captain or one British army guy who was found
mm,
evidence of Ashoka in some cave shape, something
mm,
like that. So the only evidence of Ashoka's reign and Ashoka's rule exists in those edicts, those
mm,
rock edicts which are all over the
mm,
country.
mm,
So then I started thinking that like here's this guy who was like
mm,
absolutely evil. I mean, the guy was purely evil. And the guy was evil basically because here is a man who has conquered so many countries, even when he was not the Black Prince. He
mm,
created the most
Kala
beautiful
Ashok.
building. Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, that was
mm,
what he was called. Because you can imagine why,
mm,
it doesn't, I'm sure it
mm,
doesn't need explanation. And the
mm,
second thing is that he built the most beautiful prison in Pataliputra and called it,
mm,
I mean, it's so beautiful a building, but actually it was
mm,
a torture chamber.
mm,
Here is a guy who went
mm,
to because I mean he had some skin disease, so that is recorded.
mm,
So
mm,
see, over here is some
mm,
concubine say, "Look, I can't feel like touching. I don't feel like
mm,
touching him," and he sent his entire kind of harem to the torture chamber.
mm, mm,
He killed 99 of his stepbrothers because he wanted to
mm,
kind of become the king.
mm,
And the guy whom
mm,
his father wanted to practically anointed as the future
mm,
king, he traps him
mm,
into a burning pit and then kind of kills him, right?
mm,
Then takes the throne. Then he kind of has his major Kalinga War, which is supposed to be the watershed moment in his life. Tell
mm.
me something. A guy like that, a mass murderer, psychopath. Suddenly, there's like, oh my God! I mean, I found the Buddha. Like, shit, man! I am going to be completely non-violent from now on. I'll kill
Yeah.
only one dog in my palace. Give me a break.
Mm,
That is one. Second is
mm,
that.
mm,
So I had to myself, how do you now? Buddhism, like Hinduism today, Buddhism was completely weaponized by Shuka.
mm,
Was
mm,
completely weaponized by Shuka.
mm,
Because each time he took another nation and made it part of the empire, he
mm,
couldn't have just say, look at a picture of the Buddha, please come and join the club, and I know we'll give you,
mm,
like
mm,
Ashoka made,
mm,
like club
mm,
made club Ashoka kind of, cards, and you get
mm,
30% discount if you're a Buddhist. I mean, it doesn't work like that, right? So obviously, he sent his army. There was some kind of military thing. And I think
mm,
Buddhism was like the Romans kind of after Charlemagne they
mm,
carried Christianity across the world. I mean
mm,
across Europe and later the other countries also
mm,
kind of invaded the
mm.
like the Greeks. No, the Romans did to the Greeks. I don't know how the whole thing
This-
worked. So it
Right.
needed violence. I mean, we needed armies. It needed force. It cannot be done with by just saying, okay, yeah, 30% discount, buy a Buddhist, picture and put it in the house, or I'll give you free, free 10% discount and a free T-shirt because you eat vegetarian in the Buddhist, cafe. It doesn't work like that. Number two. Number three, I started reading more. as reading, investigating more about Ashoka, I came upon this story of how he kills, massacres this sect called the Jivikas. Yeah, I mean, he massacres them and all simply because for him Buddhism was politics, and the Buddhists believe, and again in this, I'll come back to the Jivikas. The Buddhists actually believe in reincarnation, karma. The wheel of karma.
Yes,
How it goes.
yes,
It's a very
yes,
Hindu concept, right?
yes,
The
yes.
Ajivikas think that no, everything begins and ends in this life. So there is no
Right.
reincarnation. There is nothing. So they were in opposition to the
So they're
Buddhists.
like the rational materialists.
Yeah.
That
Wait. So they are in opposition to the Buddhists. So what would it matter if a small one like Ajit, a very small sect, said, no, we don't believe in the Buddha. No, doesn't matter at all because Ashoka was the emperor of such a huge empire. He wanted to make a point. He wanted to please the Buddhists. For him, the massacre was holy war. So that holy war concept, which is there in the Middle East, he was weaponizing religion, which is in India. So, or Burma. So, the whole militarizing I don't know, I mean, against
So,
the Rohingyas.
Ravi, you spend so much time, especially because you've written now two novels about Ashoka. So you spent a lot of time analyzing the psychology of
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
this king, of this emperor, right? Why did he turn to Buddhism? What was it? At that moment, what is the concoction that appealed to him?
So I have a theory about this.
Hmm.
It's always been the church and state, right? I mean, it's always been the church and state, whether it be England, whether it be Germany, anywhere, it's church and state. I mean, in tribes of Africa, that I remember reading upon this tribe, where the king and the priest had equal power, more or less. So when the king got too big for his boots, the priest would say, "Oh, it did not rain because the bad king used to kill the king." All right. So then they had the popular, okay, go and kill the king. Now, uh, one of the problems all emperors in India had faced, and today I think politicians are facing, is the Hindu clergy. You know, the Hindu clergy was very powerful. The Brahmins were very, very powerful. I mean, they could, like the church did, they could really give the king a lot of trouble. They could excommunicate the king. They could refuse to get him married, legitimize his marriages and all that. So, I think Ashoka found in Buddhism a very, very good weapon to balance the Hindus. So Ashoka gave them the land. This is my interpretation of history. I mean,
Right,
Ashoka gave
right,
them
right. Of
land.
course.
Okay. So before him, I mean, I think no, Bibisara. I mean, his father had, I think, given the Buddhists a break, then kind of Jain. So there were a lot of the kings were giving, a lot of things to. So he decided, okay, let me bring the Buddhists because Buddhism. See, there were two people who were big at that time. One was the Buddha, and the other was Mahavira. They hated each other. Okay. So now, so the Buddhists wanted to market themselves. So Ashoka seized upon this and said, okay, let me balance this, guys. Let me give the Buddhist priests viharas, let them kind of allow them to convert whatever it's. And it's good balance to the Brahmin kind of thing. So this is my theory that Ashoka, I mean, the guy was an incredible politician. I mean, if you actually look at it, incredible tactician, and strategist. I mean, like his grandfather needed Chanakya, but this guy did it on his own. So, as a combination of politics, as a combination of strategy, as a combination of brutality, as a combination of kind of, PR, I mean, you couldn't beat Ashoka. I think he's the greatest king in the country. I mean, Indian history, actually, if you think about it. And it's very strange that it took an Englishman to build it. And it's even more ironical that the national symbol of peace should belong to one of the most brutal emperors in Indian history. Which is what I find very weird. I think Sanjeev Sanyal, I've read the book, I think has written something on Ashoka. I mean, there is an ideological reason behind it, I'm sure, but I mean, he has written a demystification of Ashoka's, peaceful
I
pursuit.
see. I
I've
see.
heard about
I haven't read it,
it. Okay,
but
so this is interesting.
yeah, but novelistically, it makes for great reading, right? And
Yeah.
the other thing that that makes it so heady, this novel, is that there's Ashoka, but Ashoka is not the hero. Your
Hmm.
hero, Ravi, is the spy master, right?
Yeah.
And the eponymous Brahmin. And so where did that idea come from? So at one hand, of course, was your interest in history, the fact that history wasn't being made accessible enough in a really sort of attractive way, but also this spy master, where did he come from? He is incredibly cool.
Yeah, I was trying to define. See, those were days of machismo, right? That's how we pronounce it. Yeah, those machismo. I know machismo.
Hmm. Hmm.
Those were the days when the ideal man was a man of muscular strength, right?
Macho, right?
macho, yeah.
Right.
And the ideal scholar was uh, like bookworm. You know what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not a guy who fought battles. So I
Yeah.
said, okay, how do I create a master species like a Superman? Who had the brains, who had the brawn, and who had the very convoluted mind, and who was actually power unto himself, like a force of
Mm.
nature unto himself. So I said, okay, I mean, very difficult to kind of define the guy. I mean, if I do this, let me not kind of give
Mm.
him a name. So I said, let me have a spy
Mm.
without a name. So I decided to name the
Mm.
Brahmin. And since his origins
Mm.
are
Yeah.
both Brahminical and militarily, I mean, the guy
Yeah.
belongs to that particular heritage. I'm not revealing what it is.
Exactly. And so for that, so just just to whet the appetite of our audience and our readers, that's the unimaginable conclusion, climax of the first book, right?
Yeah.
Which is called the Brahmin, right?
Yeah,
And this
that's called the
is, yeah,
Brahmin.
yeah,
No, holding up the wrong book.
yeah. I don't have that one in Calcutta.
Yeah, okay. I should have kept it. So, so that is what I wanted to do. A man was a person who is unbeaten, but a person who is not completely immune to the softer aspects of life. For example, his relationship with the queen who later becomes empress.
Mm.
There's nothing sexual about it,
Mm.
but there is
Mm.
something there, something
There's
unspoken. There's
chemistry. Yeah. There's
Yeah, yeah, that is
yeah,
chemistry. So, you have a
yeah,
Superman with a bit of a heart, a
yeah,
monster with a bit of a heart. That is what,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing is that we've had a great deal of interest in spy stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now there
Right,
are so many spy shows, whether it's
right.
Amazon Prime or Netflix and so on. So, are you a kind of a sucker for spy stories? Has there
Yeah.
always been that element also? So, tell us a little bit about that.
I love crime stories. I mean, as I told someone that, like my parents made me read so many classics by the time I was like 15, I had to forget. But that was great because it gave me a grounding in knowledge and understanding, and I mean,
Mm,
history. I mean, gave me
mm,
So anyway, so all that happened, and then I think I came upon I don't know what when I was in my early 20s. I came upon P.D. James.
mm.
So I just totally
Oh,
hooked.
she's amazing.
Yeah, and then there was this British, that whole elegance of the British thing. I mean, even Agatha Christie is fantastic. I mean, she's
Mm,
like very simple.
mm,
So
mm.
once in England, I met P.D. James, and we had tea in a house. It was such a lovely house, and we eventually
So
decided,
cool.
yeah. And she was the governor of the BBC, and she said, "Will you have some tea?" I said, "Yes, okay." And she went inside, made the tea herself, and brought it on this lovely little tray, beautiful porcelain, and like a tea set, and the tea cozy and all
Yeah,
that. All
yeah.
right, and she served tea. I mean, it's amazing. How I mean, can you think of any of these big Indian
I'm
writers?
jealous.
Okay, no,
FYI.
yeah. And they sat down, chatted, and I lit a cigarette, and she didn't smoke. I was in ashtrays in the house. We got me an ashtray. So obviously, it was non-smoking house, which I didn't notice. In those days, it was very. I mean, nobody gave a shit.
Yeah.
So, and we talked about crime, and she said, "Look, Agatha Christie." Then we said, "Look, Agatha Christie is a friendly neighborhood murderer.
Hmm.
Which is a very, very,
Cozy.
you
Yeah.
know." And so then I started reading up. I mean, I started reading crime seriously. Like, then I went into thrillers, Ed McBain, and all these people, you know. And then today you have this. I mean, what is it? Daniel Silva, or all these people.
Yeah.
Then I start. Then there was the Scandinavian writers, which I kind of completely love. There's the French writers,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, you kind of
Yeah.
crime fiction, which is, and you know why? The reason I think it is because crime fiction has always been seen as something, not
Popular,
yeah,
lesser. Yeah.
right. But at the same time, every writer wants to write a crime novel. I mean, what Raymond Chandler, The Citadel,
Mm.
all writers want to, want scale. So, I mean, you just think about it. Crime and Punishment. It's a crime novel, right? I mean, essentially, I like Dickens. I mean, there are a lot of
Mm.
crime novels which
Mm. Mm.
are great literature. So why can't good writing, why can't great
Mm.
writing be a crime novel?
Mm.
And that has
You
actually
know,
started happening.
yeah. And I just want to sort of, tell you a little bit about one of my favorite writers, Sharadindu Bandyopadhyay, creator of Bomkesh Bokshi,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah, amazing.
famous Bengali
Amazing,
detective.
yeah,
And those novels, they're
yeah,
also such fine, portraits of Bengal in Calcutta at that time.
yeah.
Also, some were set, set in what
Feluda,
is now Jharkhand. Feluda.
Feluda, yeah,
So in Bengal, all the great novelists, they would have their detective, right?
Yeah.
That would always be the case. So, so you wrote literary fiction on one side. So Sunil Gangopadhyay, for example, wrote a lot of literary fiction, but he also had Kaka Babu, who was,
Yeah.
young adult crime fiction,
You know,
more adventure.
Stan, you should say that because in Kerala, which is, I think one of the reasons, Kerala is really not, put on the, the Indian or even the international literary map as Bengal writing has, is because they are too serious about things. So they don't have any crime writing. So crime writing was only
I
cult fiction. Okay, so I
see.
remember this really charming guy who was quite a range called Kotem Pushpanath. Okay, so
Hmm.
his detective would always kind of wear a fedora, a huge
Right.
overcoat, and boots. Imagine Kotem where the temperature is
In
like 40,
Kottayam.
43. The guy must be sweltering, right? So,
Yeah.
so that is like
Yeah.
a comic thing, but it's funny.
Yeah.
But I've always wondered why Indian crime writing is about detectives who are a caricature. I see that a lot. There
Hmm.
is this spin-off from who's that guy who writes there's the Englishman who writes an Indian thing, Inspector Putti, Inspector somebody, I don't know.
Yeah. I know the series you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, and the rest are all
Yeah.
caricatures. Anyway, go on, sorry. So what are
Hmm.
you doing?
Hmm.
Have you ever written a crime story? Don't you ever want to write a crime story?
Well, now I'm kind of tempted. I love reading uh,
Ah,
detective novels, and I love reading crime. Uh, I've never written. So, that brings me, Ravi, to something that we have talked about before, you and I, and just to sort of lure our readers in, our audience in, is that, one of the things that we've talked about is how we have more of an instinctive approach to the novel, right? You begin somewhere, and then you find out along the way exactly what's going to happen next, right?
yeah,
So, you don't plan like some writers do, who even before they've written their first
you're
sentence,
right.
they know what the ending is going to be, they
Yeah,
know what the big, tent pole moments are going to be, and so on. So now my question is that in crime, or a spy novel, or this entire sort of genre, there is a kind of a formal constraint, right, that one is
like
operating
what?
within. Hmm?
Like what?
Like
What is
there is this one unknown thing that has to be solved, right? And then you have to have a certain number of twists, and then there has to be like a red herring or something. That So what I want to ask
not
is
all,
that,
not all. That is actually
hmm,
not all. See, for
right, go on,
example,
go on. Hmm.
yeah, go on. Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No,
Go on.
no, 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 please carry on, because
No, see,
uh,
there is this
hmm,
incredible story. I forget the guy's name. A British guy who wrote this Department of Dead Ends. All right.
hmm,
So they know what the crime is,
hmm.
and they know what the murderer is, but they work the whole case backwards so they find out how he did it. Right.
Right.
So if you look at Daniel Silva's thrillers, you know who the villain
Hmm,
is. It's very clear who the villain is, and by the
hmm,
time it's like five
hmm,
chapters down, we have identified the villain. Then it's a thrill about how
hmm,
they go about catching him.
hmm,
So it's not entirely true. There are other books too which I can't recollect
hmm,
right now.
hmm,
But
hmm,
yeah,
hmm.
but what you're saying
So
is to a
yeah,
great extent, great extent.
that yeah, that that there is like this one mystery which has to be solved. So my question is that for you, who, because you've written many different novels, right? Your other novels have done very other things artistically. They've looked at, they've done accomplished different things.
Mm.
So when you approach writing a sort of crime fiction in whatever form, how do you do it? So do you still have that instinctive approach? Is it still revealed to you by and by, or then is there a second draft where you go and
See, I don't even know how the Brahmin came about. Frankly
hmm,
speaking,
hmm,
I don't know. How it evolved in my mind. I knew that,
hmm,
and okay, Ashoka was there. Sandipatra, I had researched and all that.
hmm,
But usually, when I write a crime novel, I let the end write itself out. You
hmm,
know, it's so much more fun. It's like something like the metaverse, frankly speaking, like they are the avatars. So, it's
yeah,
your own avatar. So you kind of, you're going along with them and you want to see what they're
yeah,
up to. So it's
yeah,
like it's like a profiler. So you say, okay, what's this guy going to do in this situation?
yeah,
Because suddenly your character's popping out you never planned. Like the Cavalier
yeah,
in the book.
yeah,
This thing, he was never there at the beginning of the second or the third revision, and suddenly he popped up because I
yeah, and
started.
he's memorable.
Yeah.
And he's
So,
such a great, and now that, before you were talking about how the Brahmin is also this very macho guy, right? So the Cavalier is a very nice sort of
Yeah.
complementary figure to that, right?
No, you know why? You know why? Because I wanted to. I don't like incomplete things. I mean, even in my life, maybe in my life, everything is so incomplete that I like to kind of have like in fiction,
I think all of us who
things.
write fiction primarily do it that better,
Yeah,
better
absolutely.
endings,
Yeah,
cleaner.
yeah. So I like no, it's not an ending as such. Basically, I like to tie up things, loose ends. All right. So when I found this Aryan guy and I was writing about him, then I suddenly said, how do I justify this guy? This I hate the word ecosystem, but in this particular thing in the book,
World. Yeah.
that's how I invented the Chevalier. So otherwise, I had absolutely no clue the guy was going to come up from anywhere.
Yeah.
Suddenly how he
Characters
evolved
pop
into.
up. I
Yeah, so
agree.
that is what I like. That's what I like. Enjoy writing. I really enjoy writing because I don't know. It's about the people I meet in my own books, whom I
Yeah.
never met before. That
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
great reward. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing, it's not for money or for fame that you write. You do it because of precisely this.
Yeah.
It's just, you don't know, it's only sentence by sentence that it comes alive.
Yeah.
And all
Yeah.
these characters, they just come from somewhere. They were
Yeah.
somewhere inside you, but then they are, and they're so real. So it's that
Does it
high.
happen? Does it happen to you all the time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's only, when I was writing the serial novel, Ravi, I had no idea. So, my hapless editor would ask me that, okay, can you tell me how many more, installments so we can plan ahead? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. And
Yeah,
so
I'm a
I
great
would
fan of
also,
writing anyway. So
yeah. Oh. So
no.
it's just, so, the other thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is, tell us about your reading life, right? You talked a bit about, meeting PD James. Any other sort of great influences?
I yeah. I mean, I like reading history. Right. I like reading modern history. I don't like the new old
Hmm,
historians. I actually don't.
hmm,
I mean, I really can't flow through them. They're
hmm,
really. I mean, people like Isaac Asimov, and I really love it. I mean, I
hmm,
still remember his biography of Da Vinci.
hmm.
So, I mean, one sentence really, I think begins in the middle. He says to be a bastard was a great time. It was a great time to be a bastard in Italian history. That's fantastic.
What a
Because
line.
yeah, because Da Vinci was illegitimate, and the elder son was presumed to was expected to carry on the family's business. So
Hmm,
the father and they had really put in a lot of money and effort to kind of bringing up this illegitimate child who turned out to be one of the greatest geniuses in the world. So I like the way modern historians approach history, or I mean,
hmm,
like for
hmm,
example, Alice
hmm,
Albini. I mean, how she kind
hmm,
of that if a small book, simple book, travels along the Indus. I mean, it is so accessible. So I
hmm,
like to read a lot of history. I like to read a lot of crime. Because I genuinely,
hmm,
I don't know. It seems pompous when you say, I'm a student of evil, but actually, I mean, that's the way I see myself. Because, yeah, I mean, I think that every human being is not essentially good. I think every human being is basically evil, and it's this constant battle between evil and good. And in most cases, for the survival of mankind, I mean, good, the forces of good, when
prevails.
they are able to subdue the thing. But otherwise, if you look at, I don't want to name names, but look at many of our politicians, look at many of our generals, look at many of our, I mean, generals, I mean, the guys who were at the Gundas and all that, in Africa and Latin America. There were a lot of, so as a result, and that's one of the reasons I read crime, because it always fascinates me.
Hmm,
But in the end, a simple thing, a simple act of murder, it's such a simple act, just stabbing a guy, shooting a guy.
hmm,
It's such a simple act. So what is the huge kind of complex variable thing, which
hmm,
actually ends, which
hmm,
was climaxes into a simple act of a finger or an arm.
hmm, hmm,
I thought that is what fascinates me. And I think the
hmm,
force of evil lies eventually in that. That's the bridgehead
hmm.
into darkness.
So are you going to create a contemporary detective now, one who does not wear a fedora and an overcoat?
I did create one, but I never got down to beyond a point. I wrote. I mean,
Hmm.
there was this guy called Dave Zamarin, who I think my second novel was
Oh,
actually cartoonist who becomes a detective. Well, very very Delhi, thing. Who
oh,
is a
I'd love
detective?
to read that. Hmm.
Yeah, and in
Hmm.
fact, that was the book. The second book where I actually wrote about Subhash Chandra Bose's treasure. I just imagined it, and eventually it turned out to be true after like 20 years. So, but I lost interest in that guy. I lost interest in this
Okay.
guy because
Hmm.
anyway. But that was
Hmm.
apparently a good book. I mean, according to people
Hmm.
who have read it, not reviewers, but like. But I know I don't want to. I don't know whether because literature. I mean, non-fiction is not really, especially after the pandemic. I mean, non-fiction is really, I think, losing its, losing its cachet with publishers or readers according to data or according to what publishers say. So I won't take a break.
Fiction, you mean, right? Fiction, you mean.
Fiction.
Ravi,
Sorry.
fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, fiction. Non-fiction is really big. Essentially, history, biographies, autobiographies.
And yeah, and also sort of military affairs and economics. People seem to be
Yeah,
interested.
yeah,
War, yes, that's
yeah.
what.
And
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
But
yeah, I feel
economics,
sad
I'm
about
not
that.
generally reading it. I mean, economics, not generally, but history, yes, history, war, or it's like finance, like personal finance, like how you
Yeah,
make money.
self-help. It's in
Self,
that. Yeah, yeah.
that is big. I
So
don't think
Ravi,
about.
one of the things that the other thing that really fascinates me is that you're an artist, right? So
Mhm.
initially,
No,
before
I'm
you
not.
became an editor, not now you're not, but you began as
No,
a
no, 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 I don't
cartoonist,
mean
right?
that. I'm a cartoonist, which is very different from
Yeah,
being an artist. You know,
I
I
I
can't draw to
imagine.
save my life, frankly speaking.
Yeah, but I think cartooning is also an art.
No, it is an art, but I wouldn't
Yeah,
call myself an artist. Sorry, I mean, it's
you're
impossible.
modest. You're
No, I'm not
modest.
honest. You know why? I'll tell you why.
Hmm.
An artist has there's a narrative quality to art. You know, a cartoonist is actually responding to current stimuli, and his so I mean, it's more of a journalistic activity than unless you're doing those like Charlie Brown or that famous thing about the Mao. I forget the name. Graphic novels. I can never be a graphic novelist because I can't draw. I mean, I can caricature, I can this thing. So go on. What you would say a visual person? Let's kind of put it.
Yeah, exactly. And also that makes your books very visual.
Mm-hmm.
So even uh, the Ashoka books, they're highly visual. So you must have spent, so all the history that you read, all these books that you read and digested, and then when you were writing this novel, it all sort of comes together, all the
Mm-hmm.
little details. And so how difficult was that?
No, no, but I agree with you. I agree with you that the visual, sensibility really helped. Because the job of a political cartoonist is to condense a very complicated situation to a very small comment, and with the and also let the context come through. You know, so yes, I was able to condense a humongous amount of information or backstories into a chapter or a paragraph. So that obviously you're right. I mean that did kind of subconsciously help me to do that. Yeah, I think you're right.
So, you know, what advice would you have for younger writers?
None. I mean, I am nobody to give advice to anybody.
No,
Frankly
but
speaking, I don't think. I mean, like, I'm not some guru or some wise guy. I'm just a guy who kind of goes through life and does what he likes and has a good time. I mean, like, I really don't have any advice to give young writers, frankly speaking. The only thing I would suggest is that write proper English. You know, and
so write
don't proper
serious
English.
sentences.
No, write proper English. I mean, be sensitive to words. I mean, use the words. I mean, that is all I could say. Otherwise, I don't really have any advice. And don't think
So
you're a
do you
big deal.
have?
You win the Nobel Prize, especially the great guys. Number they really wear it very cool. They really, I think, chill, more successful you are, you relax,
Yeah,
and have a good time, and always remember to have a good time. That's it. That's all I can say.
yeah.
And
I
read
think
a
that's pretty good advice.
yeah, read a lot.
Read a
Read a
lot. Read a lot. Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah,
Read widely and variously.
yeah.
So Ravi, like you talked about this tea party with not tea party, just the two of you, an intimate
So,
tea with PD James.
yeah,
Uh,
it's so
any
funny.
other sort of writerly encounters that left a mark on you?
Not really. I can't think of anybody. Frankly speaking.
Okay, I'll tell you one, which is not a writerly encounter, but this is with the artist Satish Gujral.
Hmm.
I met him, we had a long conversation. And then after that, there was this very large canvas above the sofa. So I sort of pointed to that and said, "Oh, this is beautiful." And, when did you paint this? So he said, "Oh, this is, a couple of days ago. I finished it a couple of days
Wow.
ago." And I'm thinking that he's in his
Super.
80s. So he said that, all my life I worked for 12, 14 hours a day. I would now that ever since I turned 85 or something, he said, uh, I work less, so I can only work about 6, 8 hours a day, right? And to me that, was
Yeah.
a real, that that if you can keep that alive in you, and even then, just keep at it. The other story that I sort of never tire of thinking to myself is about the writer Shivani, that her daughters was saying, and they've written about this, that she would read till the very end. So there's this image in one of I think Ida was talking about it, that she was in the hospital and water was being pumped out of her lung, right? So they had this syringe into her and they were pulling water out, and it's a horrible procedure. I've seen it. But she was hunched over and reading a book. And this
Hmm.
is when
Yeah,
she's,
that's amazing.
yeah.
That's really incredible
So,
story. Yeah.
yeah.
Satish Gujral, and we were mutually very fond of each other. I wouldn't call him a friend because he was far more serious. His daughter is a friend of mine.
Hmm.
But I mean, he was always very, very fond of me. And wherever he sees me, I will kind of sit and chat about it. And we go out to his house for dinner. And the only time he was upset with me was when his brother became prime minister. And I don't
Of
spare people
course.
drawing, and
Yeah.
this is one of the things I don't draw now. Uh, so he got upset with me. But he wasn't, he wasn't nasty or anything. But he said, "Why do you do this?" So I said, "Sir, I am a cartoonist. So, he's a prime
This is
minister's
my
pay
job.
gig. Yeah, it's my job. Those are different days."
Yeah.
So yeah, I really, he's an amazing artist. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Then you asked me. I remember. I started thinking. Another interesting experience I had was with the serial killer in Miami. No, sorry, Memphis.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, there is this particular program which allows you to kind of, meet something. And I used to write crime, so interested in crime fiction.
Yeah.
So this guy set up a meeting with me for this with the serial killer. He is such a dude. I say
Oh
that.
my God. Tell
I mean,
us.
yeah, and he was a very small, neat, trim man. And as I say, like flat eyes, which is very true.
Hmm.
And he said, "Where do you come from?" The guy had killed some 4 or 5 people who was put in prison. He broke out of Tennessee maximum, whatever, penitentiary, then went and
Yeah.
shot about 5, 6 people. Then they caught him and,
So he was in for life, kind of thing.
yeah, he's in for life. And those prisons are, like, must be maximum security because I don't think they allowed him to kind of, work next to
Yeah.
them. But very neat cell, like he tucked in, well-made bed, toothbrush, everything. So you could see it's all bars. There's no, it's like a
Okay.
cage. Okay.
Yeah.
So then, he was really, he looked at you as if you were a fly or something. Like, he's very pleasant, smiling, soft voice, but when he's looking at you, then he could just spot you, right? And he said, "Oh, where do you come from?" I said, "India." "Oh man, I've heard of prisons there. I wouldn't want to be in one of them." Freaked me out. Then he hears this guy who murdered people, he was a serial killer.
Hmm.
And he says, "So look at the way, America, wealthy countries view their privileges, even if you're a
Yeah.
murderer.
Yeah.
And look at us." Anyway, so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just so
Though arguably, such a sort of famous murderer might have had better conditions in Indian prisons. He
I
might
doubt it
have
very much.
he might have even got a
But
whole barrack to himself
no, I know
in an
people
Indian.
who've been to prison and they really suffer, even the well-known ones. I mean, like Charles Chopra didn't really kind of, I remember I was standing in the corridor of, maybe some story, God knows what, I'm going to meet somebody and somebody else standing in the corridor of the. This is not a literary conversation. I don't know what we're doing.
I know it's become an adda, so I'm going to
See,
now talk about your book again. I was
don't
looking
look
very
like a book. So this guy
scared.
was wearing, the chains. It's like he was wearing them, and he was the guy who was setting the agenda. The guy was draped in chains, but the cops were actually keeping the distance. Like, the guy is a small guy, immense charisma, but he was not. He didn't have a good time in prison. There are a lot of friends. I'm friends of people I know who've been in prison. They never enjoyed it. Let's put it that.
Hmm.
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 There's no air conditioning.
We have to talk about books, Ravi. Okay,
Okay, all right.
books and writing. And see, you didn't even give any advice to young people. But if we have questions, I know Meeraj is going to put them in the private chat. But meanwhile, Do you want to do a little reading of the book? Do you have the book? Are you going to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
me
I
do
have
it
to go.
again?
But
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't think, in this Zoom things, nobody gets questions unless, you're a very big name. So otherwise, you don't really get questions. Let me just see.
Yeah, so let's have a little, so that everyone gets a flavor of the book.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, this is the history part of it. See, the Ajibkas I was talking about, they go to this country which is not, I think current Bengal is part of it. It's called Pundrabardhana.
Hmm.
So there is this conversation between a soldier who was friendly with the Brahmin. So he says the chief Buddhist monk in Ashoka's court, Padmapada, is urging His Majesty to destroy Pundravarthana. He wants to prove to everyone that the emperor listens to him. Chandranaka continued. The Brahmin looks thoughtful. His hard, cross-hatched face, each line telling a story, looked carved in stone. His eyes had regained their wintry stare. Pundravarthana's money will come in handy for Ashoka while building new roads and cities, he said. You're right, master. The emperor is expanding Magadha and war is expensive. After conquering Kalinga, he jailed many princes, noblemen, and generals and seized their properties. He's annexing more kingdoms and taking more hostages. He calls them his guests. But who keeps guests in prison? You know? Okay, that is one. I want to see them. I'll give you some action. Give us some action.
I love Asandi Mitra as well, so you can
Yeah,
also read a bit.
I can kind of find Asante Mitra. Yeah. I'll have to. I don't even know this content. So, did I content? Yeah.
Okay, while you look for it, I'll tell our audience that the book, it also has wonderful characters such as there's a Vishkanya, there um, there is this faceless, literally there is this faceless person who uh, everyone's looking for. There is a sort of a great bete noir, right? And because the Kalinga War was the subject of the previous book, here um, Kalinga is part of Ashoka's empire, and what does that mean? He's tried to integrate it. So that's another that was, by the way, another thing that you've, I think, handled very interestingly, right?
Thank you. I don't know whether I can't find the Ashanti Mitra thing.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
in
no, yeah,
anything. Yeah.
I've got it. I've got it. Mm. This is a conversation between, Ashanti, the queen, and Ashoka. The queen and Empress Ashanti Mitra and the Brahmin. Because Ashanti Mitra, I mean, the Brahmin is in his room, and there is a black tower. The black tower is just like really, very, very, not black tower, black citadel. It's really a scary place. Anyway, so he lives there. So she has come to kind of meet him. Uh, so Ashanti Mitra asks, do you remember that time in Avantika? Avantika was Ujjain. Many years ago, before the Kalinga War, when he saved me from kidnappers, I would go to the balcony of my palace when the tension was too much to bear. I would watch the boats, hear the distant splash of the roads. There were Greek galleys carrying wine and olive oil, and dhows loaded with date, frankincense, and myrrh from Arabia. It was a freedom I could never have, of billowing sails, embracing the wind on magnificently lonely journeys to uncharted seas. I envied the sailors who felt the salty wind on their weather-beaten faces and slept under the stars of the unsullied night sky. I wished I was not a queen trapped in intrigue, murder, and war, but just a woman on a ship feeling the freedom of the wind on her face. I wish it now again. Queens cannot escape their destiny like everyone else, Brahmin murmured. She stroked his mane. Your head is turning white. Is it age or worry? A bit of both, Your Majesty. His mouth was suddenly dry. He didn't move. This woman affected him in a way nobody else did, but she was to be obeyed rather than loved. Did they turn white in prison? Her breath fell gently on his chest. Her dark eyes and red mouth were close to his, very close. He had been her prisoner ever since he had met her. When the Brahmin didn't reply, she said, Ashoka is challenging God, Brahmin. Soon there will be nothing left in the world that isn't his, including Pundravartana. He calls it his holy war, the Brahmin exhaled. his heart isn't in it, even though his head tells him to fight. He's afraid. Afraid of a bunch of ajivikas? No, he's afraid that he won't have anything left to conquer. My husband's holy war is devouring him from within. He hardly sleeps, he's drinking too much. Help him then. The Ashoka we know can't be helped when he doesn't wish to be helped. Magadha is consuming him even as he consumes it. His army is constantly at war, conquering kingdoms. Kings woo history, seeking eternal life through conquest. Even their tombs are monuments. Then give Ashoka and me eternal life, Brahmin. Okay, then it kind of goes on. Isn't that good enough? I should read more.
Yes. No, no, it's lovely.
So that's
It
enough,
really
right?
is. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
So, Ravi, during the pandemic, you very cleverly moved to the hills.
Yep.
Did that mean you got a lot more writing done
No, no, no. I
or
didn't write
reading?
anything at all. No. 2 years I didn't write anything at all. I mean, I
Yeah,
still haven't written anything at all. No. I want to kind of, do attempt some non-fiction, frankly speaking.
right.
I mean, number one, it in a writer's career sense, it makes more sense because, as I said, publishers are not really interested in kind of fiction beyond a point. Though Westland,
Mm.
my editor Kartika says that you do not stop writing it, just kind of keep thinking
Yeah.
about it. But yes, I get the feeling that publishers want to do non-fiction. So I'm thinking, this C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, who was the Diwan of Travancore, is an incredible guy. I mean, and
Mm.
he was the first man who allowed people of lower caste to kind of get into temples. He he promoted Western economics with the Marxist kind of oppose. He shot them all down, and Nehru hated him because he wanted two Indias. He wanted, a loose federation of southern countries, southern states, to be governed by, a council of which he would have been the head. So he's a very progressive man. So Nehru hated him because that guy would have been prime minister. And then I think Patel and he were friends, but Patel was very insistent that they kind of, they all become part of one country. And then I think there was some assassination attempt on him and all that. And eventually he caved in. He said, okay, I'm not worth it. So then he gave
Oh,
up his food and all that kind of stuff. Then he became a great scholar. I don't know what it is. So I think he's a very interesting guy. In
yeah,
the, in
yeah.
the, I was
So he
thinking about,
deserves a biography, surely.
yeah, absolutely. So I was thinking about it, especially his relevance in the current context, which is very, very important. Because if you look at it, I mean, you have a far civilized and prosperous South India on one side, and you have this completely brutal, backward kind of dark area of darkness, which is called Central India. I mean, like
It's
what used to
changing. It's
be the
also,
northern provinces, which is unfortunately dictating an
it's
economy at risk. Because the South Indians are the guys who are funding the states, but it's so bimaru that it's not fine. But they seem, because they have the largest number of, more,
also
more,
because resources. So,
but
for
they don't have
example,
the, that's what I'm saying.
Jharkhand.
No, but those are not even that exploited. I mean, no, I'm talking about states like UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh. These four states are really one of the biggest economic burdens. Economic
So,
and
do you
social.
see that this is going to be a major political issue in the
It is.
future? Do you think that this?
No, it won't. As long as the majority of politicians
Hmm.
belong to the north, especially
Hmm.
from the what used to be the northern provinces
Hmm.
or the United Provinces, one of those things which kind of looks at this. No, it won't be because they dominate the discourse. I mean, they are high look. Their education is very poor. They're very misogynistic and patriarchal. I mean, their entire society is weird. I mean, it's like so medieval and casteist and communal. So, but unfortunately, they're the largest number of, they're the largest say in parliament. So what do you do? I mean, you can't do anything. The South just doesn't have there. The South is funding, a lot of, not but
So,
unfortunately,
if you were going to do this biography, Ravi,
hmm.
would that be sort of a completely different approach? So, for example, you'll have to go digging around for primary sources to see
Yeah,
if letters have survived.
I
You
have,
know,
they have. I've located them.
right? Ah, okay, okay.
No, I have
Because I
located
think
them.
that's one thing in which sort of Indian publishing has really lagged behind. That is like a whole
Hmm.
range of biographies, and I think that's finally getting corrected, and we
Yeah,
finally have fascinating biographies, being contemporary
yeah,
ones being written of historical. So this would be
yeah.
wonderful. How much time do you think a project
I
like
don't know.
this would?
It's still in my head. I mean, the egg is still frying, so I need to kind of
Yeah.
uh, And now this Omicron has come, so travel is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
So right now it's a work in progress because you really can't travel in this situation. This pandemic has actually hobbled a lot of projects for a lot of people. So
especially ones, involving primary research. But this would be fascinating,
But
right?
I'll need to travel to Madras. I'll need to travel to Kerala, Travancore. That. So it will take time. I'll have to meet people. I'll have to meet the royal family of Travancore because he was the Diwan, and they're really dependent on him to kind of so various things. So they would be having stories because history has to be anecdotal. If history is not anecdotal, it's boring. You know, the war of this thing happened on this particular day. This guy was this side, that guy was this side. They met together. There are so many. I mean, it's boring. I mean, like you have to make it anecdotal.
Yeah.
Which is what
And I
Davenport
think, and which is what even in fiction, what you've managed to do with these two books, it's bringing history alive.
Yes, but
So
then sorry, but a lot
yeah,
of see, there is a lot of conjectural, what is it, conjectural
conjectural.
history
Yeah,
because see, for example, I mean, there was some. I mean, I looked at what was the food, what they wore, and especially in Magadha Empire, this between this BC and that BC. Okay, but then, like, I didn't have a complete this thing on clothes. So I had to kind of say, okay, these guys are not going to go around kind of wearing, they just wear a lot of dhotis. They're not going to
yeah,
go around wearing dhotis in the height of some winter, it is kind
yeah,
of riding a bike. So I did invent stuff.
yeah,
I
and
did,
that's what's so fascinating that that
like,
okay, where is his imagination putting in the colors, and
so
and
that I did
that's
have to invent.
the beauty
And
of
some of the
fiction.
foods, I mean, I knew that they ate peacock. So I had to kind of, so a lot of
Oh,
these things, like I knew what came from, Arabia, I knew what wine came from Rhodes. So, like that I could put into it. But I mean, a lot of it is, let's say
what fun.
40% that is conjectural.
Yeah, what fun. So we are absolutely out of time. So I'm going to
Okay.
hold up the book
Thank you for
and
bringing
tell
me.
everyone,
Okay.
please read it.
Okay.
It's as interesting as this 1 hour that you had with this gentleman, right? It's full of
Thank you.
ideas and it's crackling. You may disagree with a few things, but all the more reason for you to read it, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Devapriya. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Enjoy your time
What
in
a
Calcutta.
pleasure.
Enjoy your time in Calcutta. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for your exciting conversation today. We thank our guests Devapriya Roy and Ravi Shankar Etteth for being with us here. And we wish good luck to Ravi sir for his book. Our next discussion, Putting a Face to India's Farm Crisis, begins after a short break. Please join us for the same at 4:30 p.m.